Okay, good evening. I'm going to start this meeting out with a little introduction. Welcome to the Francis Howell School District Board of Education meeting. The purpose of this meeting is to celebrate our successes and showcase our talented students and staff, as well as to conduct the business of the district, hear reports about progress on key initiatives, and listen to the community on important issues. The Francis Howell School District Board of Education is committed to the safety and security of all of our students, staff, parents, and patrons. We have reports to consider and business to conduct that are critical to the function of our school district. We want to remind all of our visitors that we expect the audience to remain civil and respectful at all times as the board conducts its business. Calling out verbal aggressiveness, inappropriate language, or name calling is not acceptable. If the meeting becomes unruly, the board may take a recess until such time the audience is appropriate. If inappropriate behavior continues by individuals, they will be asked to leave the meeting. If the audience becomes so inappropriate in their behavior that we can't conduct our business, the board reserves the right to adjourn the meeting. This Board of Education meeting is live streamed for the community's convenience. Opinions expressed at the meeting are not necessarily the opinions of Francis Howell School District. YouTube reserves the right to monitor and block inaccurate and misleading content. That process is beyond the control of the Francis Howell School District. We want everyone to have the ability to hear the business of the district, reports presented, and the comments of everyone who is here to speak. We appreciate your cooperation and that you took the time to attend tonight's meeting. So now I will call this meeting to order with the Pledge of Allegiance.
Indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Board, I would like a motion to approve the agenda for November 18th, 2021 as presented. So moved. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Move on to our recognitions. Ms. Jen Jules.
Thank you, Ms. Lang. Tonight we are excited to recognize and congratulate our National Merit semifinalists. Francis Howell is proud to announce that 11 district students have been named semifinalists in this year's National Merit Scholarship Program. The semifinalists, who were selected based on scores on a PSAT qualifying test, will compete for National Merit Scholarships worth more than $31 million. Their scores place them in the top 1% of the more than 4 million students that take the PSAT each fall. And with that, I'd like to invite our high school administrators to the podium to introduce our semifinalists. Please welcome Dr. Lucas Lammers from Francis Howell North, Mr. John Schultz from Francis Howell High, and Dr. Bart Dimbo from Francis Howell Central.
Hi, my name is Luke Lammers. I am the principal at Francis Howell North High School. On behalf of the entire North High community, tonight I'm honored to recognize our National Merit semifinalists. These 5 young men and women have achieved at the highest levels, not just at North High, but through their entire school careers in the Francis Howell School District. This achievement is bigger than the staff, students, and families at North High. It's also a reflection of the incredible education they've received at Becky David, Cosley, Fairmount, Henderson, Harvest Ridge, Hollenbeck, and Barnwell. And yes, I did look up your records to see which schools you attended. Make sure I got that right. We have 5 students being recognized, but 3 are unable to attend because, of course, they're participating in something amazing, the Metro 8 Honor Band, which in itself is an extraordinary accomplishment. Please join me in recognizing the following students. So if I call your name, you can come on up. James Barkledge. Kyle Button. And I'm going to say the names of the 3 who are not here. So Carly Gordon. Aiden Gleason. and Riley Miller. Thank you.
Good evening. Francis Howell High School is excited to announce that we have 4 National Merit semifinalists this year. These students excel in so many areas of education, including community service, academics, and school leadership. Our group has a combined GPA of 4.67 on a 4.0 scale. Honorees tonight are musicians, athletes, board members with rank in Jordan. 2 of them are business owners. We have a crochet expert. We have presidents of multiple clubs. We have the leader of our rowdy student section at games. We have advocates for foster children, and we have a member of the Eagle Scouts that has completed 137 of the 137 possible badges. So this evening I'd like to recognize Madeline A. Where's Mom, Dad? Max Beninati. And Chloe Kaplan. And then Austin Frazier is our final nominee or award winner, and he is at the Robotics Club as the president.
Good evening. My name is Bart Denbo, and I am one of the assistant principals at Francis Howell Central High School. It is my honor to recognize a couple of outstanding students who truly are the best of what our school district has to offer. I'm going to touch on a couple of the things, or a few of the things that they have done and accomplished in their high school career. First off is Anna Baranowski. She's been the staff reporter for the Central Focus newspaper. She earned 5th place nationally for her coverage on COVID-19 last year. She's a member of the FHC math team. She's the captain of that team. She's a member of Scholar Bowl, Spanish Honor Society. She volunteers at the St. Charles City County Library. She's an algebra tutor, and she just about aced the ACT. So Anna, please come on down. Next up is Hannah Bernard. Hannah has a 4.7755 GPA. You know you're smart whenever you have to go out 4, 5, 6 decimal points on the GPA. She's also an ACT elite, just about aced the ACT as well. She's obviously an AP scholar with distinction. She's the editor of the Central Focus newspaper, a member of the Missouri Youth in Government. She's attended the Conference on National Affairs as the Missouri delegate. She founded the chapter and is the chair of the High School Democrats of America. She was a junior class president, member of the FBLA, A+ tutor, and just about every other council and academic club Francis Howell Central has to offer. So congratulations, Anna. Please come on up. Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen. Next up, we'd like to recognize 2 district teachers who received a National PLTW Outstanding Teacher Award. PLTW, or Project Lead the Way, provides transformative and hands-on STEM-focused learning experiences for students. Here to introduce our winners are Mr. John Schultz from Francis Howell High and Dr. Luke Lammers from Francis Howell North.
It is an honor to introduce Mr. Ricky Reeves as the Outstanding Project Lead the Way teacher in the area of engineering. Mr. Reeves is one of 8 engineering teachers from across the country to receive this award. And he's been recognized as an inspirational leader who is dedicated and really pushes the drive in education, really pushes for students to have outstanding outcomes. Mr. Reeves is an important part of the Viking community. He's a positive leader for the students and staff. He is currently the chair or the president of our robotics club, as well as supervising our esports program that just went to the state championship. Mr. Reeves last year was selected to be the Francis Howell Teacher of the Year, and his peers thought that he really represented the outstanding performance that we look forward to in all of our staff. Mr. Reeves. Woo.
Hello again. It's my honor tonight to share some remarks about Mike Green, also a PLTW engineering teacher. Before I get into the remarks about it, how cool is it that out of 8 in the country, we had 2? That's pretty amazing. That's pretty amazing. Before becoming a high school teacher, Mr. Green had a successful career in the industry. From his time growing up on a farm to his industry experience testing medical equipment, repairing power line communication equipment, running a parts and supply division, building seed robots, and integrating automation systems for ethanol plants, Mr. Green is able to share his wealth of expertise with his students in order to make real-world connections to increase rigor and relevance. Our students and the overall North High community are fortunate beneficiaries of his inner drive to return to the classroom so he could help to mold the future of technology and engineering in our county. From his first days at North High, Mr. Green's been a champion for industrial technology and advancing the cause of college and career readiness. One only has to watch the presentations of North High students during the annual PLTW showcase to see the amazing qualities he brings to the students in his classroom. Please join me in recognizing Mr. Mike Green for his well-deserved honor of being a PLTW Outstanding Teacher. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Lammers. And for our final recognition of the evening, I'd like to shine a light on all the wonderful ways the Francis Howell School District saluted our nation's heroes on Veterans Day. Schools across the district held parades, made signs, wrote letters, sang songs, collected donations, and hosted guest speakers, all in tribute to our local veterans. We'd like to thank the staff and students who organized the events and the many veterans who were able to join us in celebration. We honor your service and your sacrifice on Veterans Day and every day. And we have a short video that showcases some of the activities on Veterans Day, so I'll have Jane pull that up and we'll take a look.
Okay, next up, we have patron comments. During patron comments, citizens may address the Board of Education concerning issues related to the school district. Each speaker will be limited to 3 minutes. Combining time or giving your time to someone else to the speaker is not allowed. When your time is up, your time is up. We have a stand with a microphone ready so both the board and the audience may hear the patron comments clearly. The board appreciates that you have taken the time to come this evening, and we value both your input and your perspective. Once your remarks are over, please return to your seat. And I would like to remind everyone that we expect you to remain civil and respectful in your remarks, and if anyone becomes disruptive, we reserve the right to cut those 3 minutes short. Verbally aggressive language and vulgarity in any form is not acceptable and will not be tolerated. For your convenience, our 3-minute time clock is ready. We welcome our first speaker, Chris Brooks.
Ready? Good evening, board. Tonight I want to address some emails sent out by a member of this board, an elected official, to private citizens purporting to apply district policies and other restrictions to the content of the citizens' speeches given during public comment period at meetings. Specifically, the emails claim to apply policy 1455 regarding distribution of materials in schools and 1471 regarding advertising in district facilities. First, the plain language of these policies shows that they apply only to district school operations. They make no reference to public comment or board meetings. In general, district policy cannot just be applied to board meetings unless the board passes such language specifically to refer to it. The district webpage for patron comments was just recently updated to include these referenced policies, but no motion during a meeting was proposed nor vote taken by the board to update those referenced policies. Therefore, this is irrelevant. The Board of Education may certainly pass rules that apply to conduct during meetings to prevent disruptions. As chair, the board president may certainly eject disruptive audience members, but that is because the meeting itself is being disrupted, not because board policy has been applied or district policy applied to public comments. Normally, public school operation is a non-public forum. First Amendment rights are limited when applied to teachers, students, administrators, and visitors. For those of you who think that removing obscene books from a library constitutes banning them, there is no First Amendment right for those books to be in the library. Now, Regulation 1471, which applies to Policy 1471, specifically states that it applies to the non-public forum operations of the school district. When the Board of Education creates a public comment period in a meeting, this is considered a designated public forum, where First Amendment right to petition the government for redress of grievances applies. In the designated public forum, the courts have held that the only restrictions on speech can be made for time, manner, and content-neutral restrictions. That means you can eject or silence a speaker for going over their time, for being disruptive in the manner of their speech, or talking about irrelevant subjects. However, such rules need to be specifically applied to public comment and must be voted on by the board. The email from the board member attempted to forbid individuals from making reference to a website. Not only is this attempted prior restraint on free speech, but it is not a content-neutral restriction. The board could try to pass a content-neutral rule forbidding the mention of any websites, but this could be problematic if I want to reference NIH.gov for mask studies or FHSD schools for an announcement or curriculum. It does not matter if the website is political in nature because public comment at a meeting is inherently political speech. Thus, a restriction on mentioning a particular website like francishowfamilies.org during public comments would be an
We have asked you not to use that. Your time is up. Thank you.
Madam President, you have not asked me to do that.
We're moving on to our next speaker, Jamie Martin.
Good evening. My name's Jamie Martin, and this is my middle schooler, Eliza. And I'll speak first, and then she's the next speaker up. I'm just going to introduce her, and we're going to share with you a little bit about how Eliza has developed as a math student, both outside and inside this district. I remember, Eliza, when your second grade teacher, Miss Jensen, stopped me in the hallway to tell me how impressed she was with you. I remember, that you were good at modeling fractions in third grade and that you mastered long divisions in fourth grade. But when you were 10 and you were about to start the fifth grade, I kind of disrupted your life. and I came to St. Louis to start graduate school. I was hired with the Normandy School District, and immediately I felt I should encourage my children to come with me and experience what it's like when you're the only person in a room who looks like you. So I gave her the choice, whether to come to Francis Howell or to go to Normandy, and she'll talk about that in a minute. She'll tell you what that school year was like for her, and she'll tell you what the school years after were like as well. I know that it was a little bit difficult, especially when her brother and sister had really good experiences, but hers was challenging. I'll always be grateful for the years that our family spent at Normandy. Shuttling 3 kids across the city to school every day wasn't really sustainable for us. They wanted to participate in extracurricular activities. We had a toddler at home, so we ended up coming back to our home district. Anybody remember what it's like to enroll your kids in school for the first time? You gather like all the government documents you've ever been issued, you schedule the physicals, and you bring the shot records, and you probably bring your kid up to say hello to the secretary, right? So it can be a lot, but it was especially frustrating to register here at Francis Howell, and that's because of challenge courses. As a teacher, I knew that it can sometimes be difficult to get your kid into AP classes in high school if they aren't on the challenge track in middle school. So I requested that our kids be enrolled in challenge classes. College credit is important in our family. That's when the secretary expressed her concern about us coming from Normandy. She told us, Normandy students don't do well here. To add to her skepticism, we didn't have Missouri standardized test scores. MAP had been canceled the year before. I pointed out all our kids' grades and previous standardized test scores were strong, but the counselors asked me to sign statements saying that we had been advised against challenge courses and that our students may be removed if they did not perform. That didn't feel great. At parent-teacher conferences this year, the first thing Eliza's math teacher said to me was, I believe this is absolutely the right placement for Eliza in the challenge course. Eliza is a testament because she could have been shut out because of bias and assumption. When students aren't separated and cut off from resources and the support they deserve, all our kids are capable of learning
Thank
at high
you.
levels.
Your time is up.
Our next speaker will be Eliza Martin.
Sorry, we planned a little differently for this, so.
You're welcome to stand behind her if you like.
Can you just read this last sentence, the last 2 sentences? Okay. Yeah, so, sorry. We had prepared like an interview style, so I'm just showing her what she wrote this and she's gonna read it. So yeah, you just read the portion that's highlighted for you, like you can reword the questions for me. And then if you wanna read the last sentence, okay? Can she still get 3 minutes? Go ahead.
So my mom asked me to talk about how I felt as a math student in Utah. And I said that I felt pretty good. I made good grades, and I understood the material that I was learning and being tested on. I enjoyed doing math, and I was good at it and proud to be able to help others with what they sometimes couldn't understand. She also asked me if I remembered her giving me the choice on which school district I wanted to attend. And I said that our schools in Texas and Utah did have some African American students, but not very many. My mom did tell us that the school district was poor and that it would be important for us to be in areas where there were kids that have different struggles and problems than ours. I thought it would be an interesting and unique experience for me, and I guarantee you it was. School that year was very interesting. I had a very nice yet very inexperienced first-year teacher, and it was hard for all of us to learn from her because she didn't demand respect and most definitely did not receive it from our class. She didn't understand the material she was teaching because she was inexperienced with this as well. That year, the next year, we came to the FHEA school districts, and we started the year virtually. My brother and sister did fine in their challenge courses, but I'm the only one in my family with ADD, so looking and sitting at a screen all day and trying to listen and learn was very hard for me. I came back in person the second quarter, and the other subjects were much easier, but math was still very challenging. We used a lot of things from our fifth grade year, like fractions and decimals, but I couldn't understand how to use those methods the way we were asked to. Though I made pretty good, well, fairly good, grades on all of the assignments that year, I only passed one test. This year, I started 7th grade, and I was enrolled in Challenge Math, but we didn't know. So when I first found out, I was a little anxious that it would be a repeat of last year. But I understood what we were understanding so far, and I made a 90 on my last test.
Thank you. Your time is up.
Next up, we have Sam Young.
Hello, I'm Sam Young. I really enjoyed that. I wish I'd heard the end of it, so I hope you get out the rest of that story sometime. A central belief of America is that all people are created equal and should be treated equally by our government and the law. Equality is present in the very first documents of this country. It's been enshrined in our Constitution, expounded on in constitutional amendments, and clarified in law, including civil rights law. Equality has been debated in philosophical, academic, and our common cultural settings. And equality is an inherent part of our forward progress for this country. This school board administration has decided to instead make equity and anti-racism focus. While justification for equality is well thought out, well documented, this school district has provided very little justification for reducing the virtue of equality below that of equity and anti-racism. The district has taken over a year to even provide a description of equity. It still hasn't defined anti-racism. The definition of equity isn't even clearly differentiated from equality on the district website. The district site says equity, quote, provides the opportunity for all students to achieve equal outcomes. And again, quote, helps ensure that every child has equal opportunity for success. There's even confusion with the Equity Committee, which doesn't list equity as a goal, but instead says, quote, they will, quote, ensure all students have an equal opportunity for success in school and life after school. You have failed to clearly differentiate between equality and equity. Considering how much the equity page uses the term equal opportunity, you would have provided no justification for shifting to equity. There are no metrics provided, and significantly, no success stories for how shifting to equity will actually help this school district. In fact, you have provided no evidence that shifting away from equality will actually help the disadvantaged students of this district. I think you can't fully justify the shift to equity, and that is why you refer to equal opportunity so much on a web page that is supposed to be about equity. I also don't believe that the school board has the authority to deviate from the law of this land. There is a reason that equity is a bedrock principle of the country. I'm proud to say that I spent 20 years as a U.S. naval officer ensuring the defense of equity for all, and I ask that the school board withdraw the statement on equity and anti-racism and affirm the commitment to equal opportunity. Thank you.
Next up, we have Amanda Linsky. Amanda here? Okay. Randy Cook.
Good evening. Way back in 2016, I was one of about 15 people in attendance at the Board of Education Candidate Forum held at Howell Central. The common theme was that all the candidates pledged to do what's in the best interest of the students and the community. No surprises there. We all want what is best. The question is, who shall decide what is best? The answer, of course, is you, the school board. That's why we elect you. If the school board no longer aligns with the community makes that known at the ballot box every April. I think I speak for most people in this room when I say that the book material has been read aloud here and at school board meetings across our region makes me very uncomfortable, but I fully understand why it's being done. If it makes you uncomfortable, I ask you to ask yourself, am I putting the students first by allowing this material in our schools? So I humbly ask that you consider a new policy regarding books at Francis Howell. There was mention of some revision of book policy over the summer, but I've seen nothing further from the board about that. So instead of a policy where the community plays whack-a-mole and submits book challenges that we know will go nowhere, let me suggest a whitelist book policy, a policy that states no book with certain content shall be allowed in our schools until it has undergone a very thorough, transparent approval process, including full individual board approval, a policy that can allow the classics but avoid the obscene. And I'm certainly happy to meet with any board member to discuss the specifics of such a policy. But the idea that we let books into the library that depict scenes clearly banned from any video on district computers is wrong. With respect to the most recent book challenge that's on tonight's agenda in item 14A, is the board willing to extend the logic used to approve that book to movies shown in the classroom? Would the board support showing a movie with a very graphic scene in it if it meant that we could show a movie with which underrepresented groups of students could identify? If not, what's the difference? I fully expect a response to those three questions in accordance with policy 0412. The adults need to step up and start acting like adults here. We can have a diverse library and still make good decisions about the content. It should have been a red flag to everyone involved in that book committee when a decision of 11 votes out of 12 for a book to stay on Francis Howell Library shelves is met. There are very few issues that 11 out of 12 people can agree on these days. So the board should be asking itself, is our book policy very effective? I would vote that it is not.
Thank you. Your time is up.
Next up, we have Emily Winham.
Hi, my name is Emily Winham, and I've spoken before about trying to get the district to require masks for everyone. I was here in July and listened while Dr. Rumpus went over the COVID report. He said that in July, the COVID numbers in general were about the same place as they were a year before, and then the school voted to make masks optional. In September, I spoke and had cool graphs showing how our COVID rates compared to Parkway, which is masked, and Fort Zumwalt, which wasn't masked. The numbers clearly showed that masks worked. There were several other excellent speakers as well, calling for reason. Nothing was changed. I've read ridiculous stories, such as how 22 kids from a class of 25 were at a birthday party and someone had COVID, but no one was quarantined because the exposure didn't happen on school property. I've stated over and over again that we need to know what percentage of students and teachers are vaccinated before going mask optional, but nobody has listened. Common sense has been thrown out the window. The school knows ways to keep everyone safe, but they choose not to do so. Instead, listen to a small, loud minority. So instead, I'm going to talk about the banned books. Not about how I think the books should be in schools, but about the review committee. As some of you may know, the first questionable book was reviewed, and 11 out of 12 of those who read it voted it should stay. The issue is that the district published the names of those who reviewed the book, and one is a student. The teachers who are on the list are now being targeted by people in the extreme conservative groups. You know, people who had signed up to speak at board meetings with the name, "Let's Go Brandon," whatever. Some people in these groups, whatever. Some people in these groups have called for boycotting the teachers and have said that if a teacher approved the book, they must be trying to groom kids, and parents should do everything they can to keep these teachers away from the kids. I know the district does not want to deal with any more obnoxious sunshine requests, but the names of those who reviewed the books needs to not be published. It honestly shocks me that anyone thought publishing these names was a good idea.
Next up, we have Ken Gontars.
Two weeks ago, election results from across the nation spoke loudly and clearly. Stop teaching critical race theory. Stop allowing sexually explicit books in our schools. In Pennsylvania, Colorado, Kansas, New Jersey, Virginia, Ohio, Minnesota, Washington, California, school candidates who oppose critical race theory won their races. Governor-elect Youngkin of Virginia said on day one his first executive order will be to ban critical race theory. In the Francis Howell School Board and the superintendent, are they still saying that CRT will not and is not being taught in our schools? Is the promise that was made in July that CRT will not be taught still in effect? Well then, explain this. On page 16 of the Francis Howell Black History Curriculum, Article 3 is replete with 1619 project endorsements and advocates that this militant perspective of Black history. Everybody, either pro or con, knows that the 1619 project is the epitome of critical race theory. That it was originated and authored by Nicole Hannah-Jones. It is in direct contrast to the 1776 Unites curriculum. Its major premise is that the Revolutionary War was fought over slavery. This is false. This is a lie. We've uncovered a February 25th, 2021 video, a conversation with Nicole Hannah-Jones and Dr. LeGarrette King, in which LeGarrette King, where they speak together for an hour, advancing and advocating for the 1619 project curriculum. The same 1619 project perspective contained on page 16 of the Francis Howell Black History Curriculum. Have any of you researched what the 1619 project is, who Nicole Hannah-Jones is? Yet every one of you will continue to say that critical race theory is not being advocated in our schools. Do you know how disingenuous, how uninformed, and how dishonest this is? 2 weeks ago, I stood outside the John Weldon Elementary School for 4 hours during Election Tuesday night, passing out handouts where people could read about CRT and the sexually explicit content in books available in our schools. Of the 100 cards I passed out, 95 of those voters told me they can't wait to vote for candidates who oppose critical race theory. So, we have a community who opposes the teaching of CRT, who opposes the availability of sexually explicit material in our libraries, a community whose ever-increasing taxes go to support schools, the salaries, the pensions, the benefits of school systems, who feel like their voices are being ignored, whose concerns are simply being blown off. Regarding CRT, what's the harm in considering a 1776 type curriculum? Thank you.
Next up, we have Gwendolyn Garth. Gwendolyn? There she is.
Hi, my name is Gwen Garth, and I'm a first grade teacher here in the Francis Howell School District. I've never done anything like this before, and honestly, I like talking in front of kids, not grown-ups, so this is hard for me, but I really felt like the last month of my life has been the hardest month, and I felt a responsibility to share some of that with you and tell you that your teachers are struggling right now. I haven't been at school for the last month. I spent fall break in the hospital. All started with a kidney infection, and that was not diagnosed right away, and has led to me being out of school for 19 days, and I know all those days because there is no place I would rather be than in school. It breaks my heart that I have to live vicariously through a sub right now and see my kids on Zoom. And I'm just telling you this because one of the things that I think the school board could do to help this situation is to bring back the recess paras. I don't think it was really thought out of how serious the recess para position really benefited the teachers in the elementary school. I was in a focus group about a little over a month ago that asked what we could do with the COVID relief money that was given, and every elementary school person on that Zoom call said, bring back the recess paras. And the reason why is this: the recess paras, they provided 4 hours of time where teachers had full breaks. Teachers could have their breaks cut in different parts of the day, and the recess paras could pick up our kids from our classrooms, take them out, and our breaks are getting cut short because of this. We are having to spend a lot of time going back and forth out to the playground and such, and we're not getting our full breaks. And also, in my situation at my school, it means that our break is we get our break mostly at the beginning of the day. So from 1:20 until 4:05, I have no time without students. So I have about 3 hours where I can't take a break and use the restroom or anything without students. And yes, I could ask a teacher to cover my classroom, but what that involves is another teacher having to stop teaching and stand between the two classes and watch about 45 to 50 kids. And that's just, you don't do that unless it's a total emergency. So what teachers do is they don't drink enough and they don't use the restroom and they wait till the end of the day. And I know I'm running out of time, but the last thing I just want to say is you keep asking what we can do to retain highly educated, highly qualified teachers. Let us teach. Let recess paras do recess monitoring. It's not that we're above that job. It's just that we need their support so we can do our job. And if we spend the time doing all the recess things, we don't
Your
have
time
time to
is
do
up.
that. Thank you.
Next up, we have Courtney Camp.
Hi, honestly, I'm not super prepared because I didn't know if I was actually going to make it up here. But I guess I just kind of want to echo the teacher that just came up here, and I'm sorry if I didn't catch her name. But I'm here to just really show my support for the teachers over the last couple years. Obviously, we've asked the world of them. And, I've been out in the community outside of this room in many different avenues at different town halls where politicians are coming in and speaking, kind of degrading the teachers and speaking in ways that kind of somehow all of this lands on their shoulders. And I'm just here to ask the board to echo what she's saying, bring the paras back, repair your relationship with FHEA, and really build a community with them. So that's the first thing. Secondly, I want to say that I am fully in support of the 1619 project in our district. And yes, I have fully researched it. I'm going to actually read from words from a Black activist who I admire. Her name is Brittany Peckneck Cunningham, and she's from one of St. Louis's very own. This was in a response to a CBS News poll that said, "How young is too young to teach children about race?" And her response, "Children know about race whether you teach them or not, especially Black children." The answer to this right question, had it been asked, is to teach about racism so they don't perpetuate or internalize it. But the people who ask this question aren't interested in that answer. Guess what? It's not just children of color who learn early through experience that their race is malaligned. White children also learn early that their race is socially prioritized and preferred. I can see that sometimes in my 7-year-old, and I grew up across the river from here, actually in a very small community with zero diversity. I live in St. Charles now due to close proximity to that lovely hometown. And my son's experience is drastically different than mine. My family is a perfect example of generational wealth. My dad's a farmer. He was a farmer, or his father was a farmer. He inherited that land, has farmed it, and he's getting ready to retire. And, you know, at some point we make the decisions on who farms that land and where that goes. So there's a lot of history that hasn't been taught to me. I'm 36-year-old and learning it as a 36-year-old. And so I just implore you to keep going.
Thank you. Your time is up.
And that wraps up our patron comment time. Next up, we have FHEA.
Good evening. I'm sad to report that morale is still at an all-time low. We are losing teachers and support staff. This puts a great strain on our buildings and puts more stress on our teachers. We have a teacher that has subbed 7 times due to the no-fills this year. She isn't interested in subbing. She needs her planned time. Now another para is leaving that building, and they've been told that they may have to start subbing for the paras. And we understand that. Our students need to have the adults, but our teachers can't maintain that. We don't have enough custodians, therefore our classrooms don't always get cleaned. That will fall on the teachers too. What are you going to do? We need to strategize together. This is exactly what Dr. Pam Sloan said over the summer. Suppressing the voices of the teachers may work in the short term because you can move through work quickly and do it your way. Unfortunately, this is what is happening. Some district admin are doing this to us instead of with us. When will we work together? This district will not move forward with all of the division. Look at this room. Teachers are upset, support staff, parents, patrons. The Francis Howell community is in disarray. How will you regain our trust? I hope everyone, a question that came up tonight at our meeting is, why would the people that funnel every day, which would be our special area teachers, they may funnel kids every day, but they don't get the $19. And if a teacher subs in a room that is having kids funneled into, they also wouldn't get the $19. Why? Everyone, I hope everyone has a great Thanksgiving, and thank you.
FHEA.
Good evening, Board of Education, Cabinet, Administration, and community members. FHEA would like to take this time to thank you for removing the agenda items which were requested to be pulled and look at dates for going into negotiations for these items. We can all agree there are concerns around the difficulty in hiring and retaining staff at this time. We appreciate the opportunity to come together to work on long-term solutions.
Next up, we have our MSBA November board report.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Missouri School Boards Association's board report for the month of November. We thank you for the opportunity to share some news and information during a few minutes of your board meeting. We begin with a look at the continuing impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on Missouri's public schools. School districts throughout the state are implementing the protocols and policies designed to keep students, teachers, and staff safe and healthy while keeping students in school. The new director of the Missouri Department of Health and Senior Services, Dawn Karoff, tells us one new option aimed at keeping students in school following an exposure to COVID-19 is called Test to Stay.
if they are close contact, can remain in school as long as that they're constantly being tested and they are consistently and correctly wear a mask. So it keeps kids in the school. Also, a very important part of a student's education are the extracurricular activities, and the test to stay also allows them to participate in those activities. So yeah, it's just another option for schools to keep kids in the classroom.
Karoff says it's also important to take precautions against the seasonal flu as the weather turns colder. He says we can't count on another mild flu season this year.
And our fear is that people say, well, it's just going to be another mild year, but we can't predict that now. And certainly as students and teachers, parents are starting to get more indoors because it's starting to get a little cooler out. It's particularly worrisome. And now's really the time to get vaccinated. It takes a few weeks for really have full coverage from the influenza vaccine. We're getting close to Thanksgiving. So obviously now's the time that students, parents, teachers should get their annual influenza vaccine.
Updated school guidance for COVID-19 is posted on the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education's website. School districts throughout the state are continuing to struggle with the shortage of teachers. A new effort to recruit and retain teachers sponsored by the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education is called Teach Missouri. Its goals are to elevate the teaching profession, improve the perception of being a teacher, attract the next generation of Missouri teachers, and develop a statewide recruitment system. Here's a public service announcement produced for Teach Missouri.
You'd make a great teacher. Teach has all you need to get started for free. On teach.org, you can search for state-approved teaching programs around the country and find in-person, online, and hybrid certification courses that fit you and your schedule. You can also find resources like stories from real teachers, information about financial aid options, teacher pay, certification how-to guides, and a personalized to-do checklist. If you have any questions, you can talk to our teacher coaches. Subscribe to get all these resources and more.
You can find out more about how to become a teacher in Missouri by visiting missouri.teach.org. It won't be long until the Missouri General Assembly convenes for its 2022 regular session in January. Education issues are likely to be the subject of considerable discussion, as is the case most years in the Missouri legislature. The MSBA Board of Directors has approved legislative priorities for the session, including opposition to vouchers, tuition tax credits, or other programs that erode support for public schools, opposition to moving school board elections from April to November, and support for the expansion of and access to high-capacity broadband internet services throughout Missouri. Pre-filing of bills for the 2022 session will begin in early December. That's it for this month's edition of the MSBA Board Report. Thanks for allowing us to have some time at your board meeting, and so long from Columbia.
Board, I would like a motion to approve the consent agenda items for November 18th, 2021 as presented. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Board, I would like a motion to approve the stipend for teachers who teach additional students unexpectedly as a result of an unfilled position as presented. Ms. Simpkins.
Thanks, Mrs. Ling. When we are unable to find a substitute teacher, in many cases our students are divided by the remaining classes that are in that grade level. On average, we have about 6 sections per grade level across the district and about 22 students per class. So this means that a teacher could unexpectedly have 4 to 5 students that she or he must welcome into her class unexpectedly, meaning that they may have to really work to find ways to make that a productive, engaging learning opportunity for those students, as not every class is always on the same page when it comes to their learning. We are not utilizing the $95 for that particular day for a substitute, as one could not be found, and we're asking that $95 be divided amongst the teachers that are accepting and welcoming those additional students, and that's where the $19 stipend has come into play. We know that finding substitutes is extremely important, and as you know, we've been working on that for several years, working to be sure that we have enough substitutes, but there is definitely a shortage of substitute teachers in our area and across the state. And so this is an opportunity to thank those teachers that are helping us and supporting us when we need to funnel those students, when other opportunities aren't available to put a caring adult in that classroom.
Any questions, discussion, board?
Yeah, about how many no-fills are we dealing with on an average day at this point?
This year, we have seen a much higher increase in no-fills. We're looking at probably 12 to 15 per day across the district.
And has there been consideration to raising our sub-pay to help that issue? Could we potentially pull from some other districts if we were to raise our pay rather than distribute it to the people that are left having to deal with those no-fills?
So we've had several conversations about our substitute pay. We're comparable to districts in the area, $100, $110 in some other areas of our neighboring districts. We're $95 per day. When we have focused on increasing the pay, we've looked at it as a way to incentivize our substitute teachers to work in Francis Howell. So as they work their days here in Francis Howell, then their pay increases each quarter, or the stipend that you approved last month, so that we could encourage our substitutes to focus their time here in Francis Howell. In previous surveys, it's not always the dollar amount that encourages substitutes to work in one district over the other. It's a feeling of belonging. It is feeling welcomed into the school. It's working in the community that they live in. It's where their children go to school. So there are many other reasons why substitutes choose the districts that they go into. We haven't had the resources to increase our pay and stay as competitive maybe as we'd like to. I think that's something that we can address when we are ready to do that with the resources that we have as a district.
Any other questions, board? Okay. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Board, I'd like a motion to approve the summer school proposal as presented.
Second.
Ms. Simpkins, are you presenting on this one? Have anything to add? Anyone? Oh, there we go. Welcome back.
I'm Dr. Luke Lammers, and this is Dr. Chris Garland, and we're here to present the summer school proposal. We could go to the first, oh, I have it here, don't I? That's what this is for. All right. So the first thing that I want to talk about, we did make this presentation focuses primarily on the changes that we made to the summer school proposal over the previous year. The programming that we are offering the same programming. We're not adding any programs to the summer school proposal for this upcoming year, but we did spend a lot of time talking with other departments outside of academics. We spoke with transportation, human resources, some in finance, in order to try to maximize some efficiencies, in order to still offer a very robust program for our students while maximizing efficiencies and having less strain on the overall organization that would last throughout the entire summer. So you'll see that a lot of our programs have been truncated down to mostly June and that first week of July. Clicker, here we go. So I'm gonna let Dr. Garland speak about elementary.
Thank you. I thought I would just take a minute just to highlight some of the changes. Like Dr. Lammers said, we're very excited that we're still going to be able to offer a very robust program for our elementary students. We will offer our remedial program, which we call Elementary Summer Success, as well as our 4 enrichment camps, STEM, robotics, sports, and studio art. So we're very excited about that. We have high participation in all of our summer programs, so we are very excited that it's robust again. Some of the changes, just to highlight, as Dr. Lammers mentioned, it's going to be a 4-week program this year from June 13th through July 8th. We primarily bumped it to the middle of June, just not knowing what's going to happen with weather this year. This past year, we butted right up from, having to make up the snow days to right when summer school started, and that was a bit problematic. So we cushioned it a little in order to accommodate any potential weather issues. The enrichment camps, previously we would stagger the weeks that those were offered. This year, because we've shortened our program a little bit, we are offering all of the camps every week. That will give all of our students who are interested and want the opportunity to participate in our summer camps. And the only other slight variation with camps is we used to house camps at one of our sites that was also hosting Summer Success. And because of the sheer numbers and logistics with midday drop-offs and pickups, we are moving camps to a separate location this year. I'll turn it back over to Dr. Lammers, and he'll highlight just a few of the changes at the secondary level.
Thank you. So one of the modifications that we're making at middle school and high school is we are only offering in-person summer school this year. So for the middle school summer success program, it's going to be the same timeline. You'll notice a lot of the programs are all on the same timeline this year. That was one of the ways we're trying to maximize the efficiency. So in-person only at the middle school level, and then for the enrichment camps, last year we had some limitations, some caps on enrollment for COVID-related purposes, and we are removing those caps this year that we had last year for COVID for contact tracing purposes, so that we can serve more students, especially now that we're seeing more and more of our students becoming vaccinated. All of these programs are going to run at the same time as the Summer Success Program so that we can maximize that efficiency with our administrative overhead. At the high school level, last year we offered 2 full credits, so students could earn 4 full credits last summer, and we did that because we saw the higher failure rates during the closure and during virtual instruction, and we had a remarkably high number of credits that were earned last year, and based on the calculations and looking at our student need, we feel like we really addressed that need last summer. So this summer we're proposing going back to offering 1 credit of high school courses that we've done forever, and that is pretty common among all the summer schools in the state of Missouri. So that's coming down from 2 credits to 1. We're going to have 2 9-day sessions, each one of those being 1 semester, and we did that because one of the weeks is the 4th of July week, and so we needed to have a balanced first semester and a second semester. Credit advancement is also, kids can earn up to 1 full credit. The ACT Prep program will only have a 4-credit option this year, so we hope to boost our enrollment in the ACT Prep offering. And then from the financial standpoint, one of the things that we're really proud of with the summer school program that we offer is on a year-in, year-out basis, we provide an extraordinary benefit to our students, to our community, and to our district, while also running in the black for a little bit. You know, we typically, our budget ends up anywhere from $50,000 to $100,000 in surplus every year in our summer program, and every year we budget very conservatively, getting it close to that, as close to zero as we can. So right now our projections are showing a surplus of about $39,000, and then of course if enrollment increases, then we should be well into the black, as we always are, while still providing an extraordinary benefit to our students and to our district. With that, we will entertain any questions that anybody has.
Any questions, comments, board? Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Board would like a motion to approve the continuation of the current mask guidelines and mitigation protocols as presented, to be reviewed again at the December business meeting, and to allow the superintendent to make changes to protocols as the situation dictates. Dr. Rumpus.
Good evening, board members and patrons. Here to present our November update to you related to COVID in the Francis Howell School District. Sorry for that. Just to remind you of the St. Charles County guidelines within which we are operating. There still is an ongoing expectation that we are contact tracing when we are notified of positive cases in the district. There are 2 automatic ways that our students and staff do not have to quarantine. One of those if they are fully vaccinated, and the second would be if you have had COVID in the past 90 days. And then we are still expected to quarantine following the guidelines of the county, which have changed a little bit, and I will speak to those here momentarily. I'm going to start by sharing some of the recent data, the most up-to-date data that we have. Starting with the county, this first figure is our 14-day county rolling average of new cases, and this is the number of new cases. You'll see we've had a slight uptick in the last few days, but as of yesterday, we were at 56. We hit a low about 2 weeks ago of 45, but that's still much lower than the peak of 105 when we began the school year. We were at 74 when I spoke with you last month. And to give you a comparison to November 11th last year, we were at about 260, so significantly lower than where we were at last year. This slide shows specifically the positivity rate within the Francis Howell School District zip code area. As of yesterday, we were at 6.59%, just below the county average, which was at 6.89. Again, that's about 2% lower than where we were last month. This figure is important because as we get closer to that 5% threshold, that's what is regarded as low community transmission. This is the prevalence per 1,000 people within the county. We're currently at 1.95. Like I said, we were a little bit lower about 2 weeks ago at 1.46. But again, we're at 2.36 last month, so headed in the right direction. And this slide shows similar information just in a different way on a heat map. The light blue area there, you'll see we're about a shade lighter than we were last year, which again just indicates that the level of community spread continues to come down. Looking specifically at our district data, and this was again as of 5 p.m. yesterday, so it's changed a little bit today. But as of yesterday, we had 19 current positive cases in the district. 4 of those were students and 5 were staff. 82 of our students were on standard quarantine, meaning they're at home for the duration of their quarantine. And we had 6 students in the district who were on modified quarantine. That brings our cumulative total for this year to 491 total positive cases in the district. About 4/5 of those have been student cases at 413, 78 of them have been staff. We've had almost 1,800 students under standard quarantine since the start of the school year, and then 328 have received modified quarantine. That next number shows that 64 of our students of the 1,772 that were previously identified as standard quarantines have later tested positive. So that we've been using that number this year as our spread rate within the district, and so that puts us at 3.61, just the slightest bit lower than where we were last month. And then 1,521 student and staff members have been able to remain at school since they've been vaccinated and they were exposed during the school year. This slide breaks those down a little bit further just to show our secondary mask optional grades versus our elementary grades. So 194 of our students at the secondary level have tested positive, 219 students pre-K through 6. Of our overall standard quarantines, just over 1,000 of those have been at the secondary level. And then when we look at our modified, it's a little bit the opposite direction, that 258 of those have been at the pre-K 6 level, which we would expect because of the mask usage that they have the option for modified quarantine this year. And that last figure shows the breakdown of our 64 students who have later tested positive, who are identified as close contacts and under standard quarantine. 40 of those were at the secondary level, or 4%, which is about the same as last month, and then 24 at the pre-K through 6 level, which is 3.11% overall. This slide shows yesterday's active cases, the number by building and by enrollment. So just showing the percentage positive within the building. That's important because that's the number that St. Charles County uses when they talk about whether or not we should be looking at other mitigation strategies within a building. Sorry, I'm not sure what I'm doing to cause it. The good thing you see there is that 15 of our buildings yesterday did not have any positive COVID in the school district. This slide shows our number of positive cases by month. And again, I just think this is important because it shows that in August and September, when we started the school year, 255 positive cases. Last month in October, that went down to 192. And through yesterday, we had 44 in the district, which is fantastic for a variety of reasons. So as was shared, the recommendation is to continue with the current the current mask guidelines for another month and the other mitigation strategies as presented. And I will speak to that a little bit more in a moment. All along, we have said that we are monitoring our district data and the county data and want to be responsive, that we didn't want to keep all of our mitigation strategies in place the entire year if we did not have to. And so based on the data that we're seeing at both the county level as well as within the district, assuming that those numbers continue to improve or stay the same as they are right now, we do anticipate being able to recommend to you next month that when we would return, because of the 30-day guideline, we need to ask you again next month to maintain the guidelines through leaving for winter break if that's the direction we're headed. However, we do anticipate asking you when we return in January to be mask optional district-wide. St. Charles County has recently given us another option for quarantine that I would like to explain to you a little bit, and that is a modified restricted school quarantine. So what the county health department has said is that based on the level of spread that they have seen within our schools, based on the other mitigation strategies that are present, that they are now allowing a quarantine where if either party, either the person who tested positive or the close contact, were wearing a mask or were not wearing a mask, and that's the distinction, that the close contacts would now be able to continue to attend school and do their quarantine under this modified restriction if they agree to wear a mask for the duration of the quarantine while they're attending school for the next 14 days. As long as the student wears the mask and remains symptom-free, student or staff member, they can continue to attend school. The only time that we would lose that as a district would be if we exceeded 4% positive at any given time in one building or within a specific classroom. If there were 3 or more positive or probable cases, we would not have the option of a modified restricted quarantine, and we would have to revert back to all students going home. We would like to implement that next week, working with our administrators, following Thanksgiving, so the Monday after, next Monday. But working with our administrators, what the structure would look like for that. The reporting is a little bit different, and there would need to be a parent and student agreement around the mask usage in order for those students to come. Right now, that would pertain primarily to our secondary students and staff where masks are optional, or on the remote instance at the elementary level where we might have a student who, for a variety of reasons, is not wearing a mask, that this could also be an option. 2 other options, one was just mentioned in the MSBA update, is the idea of test to stay. That's another option that was developed at the state level that allows somebody who has been identified as a close contact, if they have 3 rapid antigen tests during the first 7 days following their exposure, they would be allowed to continue to come to school or work as long as those tests are negative. Under the modified restricted version, there's less need for this. However, the difference is, under the modified restricted quarantine, students still cannot participate in extracurricular activities until the quarantine window has ended. Under the test to stay option, a student would be able to continue to participate in athletics or activities as long as they're tested on the day of the event. So for an athlete, that would mean if they're wanting to attend practice for 5 days, they would be having a test all 5 days that would show that they continue to be negative and they would be allowed to attend. That also has a mask requirement attached to that one as well if you want to continue attending school and participating in the activities. So we're looking at what logistically that would look like to implement within the district, to have the tests available, to who would be giving them, and clearly there would be a parent consent portion to that as well. We are not randomly testing students. We would not do so without parent agreement and permission up front. The last thing that contributes to this that does make us feel that we're closer to making that mask optional recommendation is that the vaccine is now available for 5 to 11-year-olds. Students who receive their first dose by November 28th, that's a Sunday, 3 weeks later they can get their second dose, and then 2 weeks later they're considered fully vaccinated. So doing that as late as November 28th would mean that they would be fully vaccinated as of January 2nd, and when they return on January 3rd, would not have to quarantine if they were a close contact to a positive case at school. So it's a combination of the district and the county data
where we're at with the number of positive cases and the low levels of spread, and that continuing, combined with the option for the modified restricted quarantine, the test to stay, and the availability of the vaccine at that level, which is why we anticipate next month asking you to, or making a recommendation asking you to be mask optional when we return in January. At this time, I can answer any questions that you might have.
The decision for students who are on the modified restricted quarantine to not participate in extracurricular activities, is that a district decision or a MSBA decision?
That is a MSBA decision. They have their own guidelines, and they actually have additional parameters in place. This is related to close contact, and then they have another return to play protocol involved for athletes or students in activities who had tested positive in order for them to return to sports.
Thank you.
In that test to stay option, would that fall on the responsibility of the parents then to make sure that those kids were tested? We wouldn't be doing that at the school level, would we?
We are exploring that option. Right now, initially, it might be that it would, if the parents can get the test, that would be an option. We are looking at, there are some state grant-funded opportunities to fund both the tests as well as possibly if we need additional personnel or resources to support that. When you think about the number of close contacts at the secondary level that would involve when you think about athletics and activities, many of those students, if they were choosing to be vaccinated, have already done so. So the number of close contacts this year has already been lower. Then when you remove the students who have already been vaccinated, we're actually talking about a small group of students who would qualify and maybe be interested in the test to stay option. So looking at what that would require of our resources within the district to determine if it's something we could do in-house or not.
I would also add that when the test to stay option first came out, it was really intended to be school district wide, but now with this modified restricted quarantine and those other measures in place, it's really not necessary. At one point, it would have been the only option for some students to remain at school, but moving forward, most of the students during the school day would have the option to stay at school without test to stay. So when we first discussed it, the logistics of asking our nurses to test, dozens of kids was very daunting and wasn't likely to work. But now that it's just reduced to just those, likely it's going to be just reduced to those involved in activities. And again, just those who aren't already vaccinated, it really should be a very small number.
Thank you. My other question is, the teachers that have tested, are we allowing those teachers that are considered close contacts, are we allowing them to do the Zoom from home, or are they at home?
Yes, staff members who either as a close contact related to their own exposure, positive case, or if they've had to quarantine because of a positive family member, if the staff member is able to work from home in Zoom, we have allowed them to do so.
Great. And then also, when we had discussed this in August, we had talked about the possibility, I know that we weren't doing our COVID, what we had done for them last year for COVID pay. Are we still looking at that as an option and going to bring that data to the school board? I know that, I think Dr. Hovind said next month you were planning on doing that. I just want to be sure that it's not forgotten.
Absolutely. We have been collecting that data and still analyzing it. The numbers are not very big. We've not seen, the numbers that we were working on last year were much larger. So we are collecting that and happy to share that with the board.
Okay, great. Thank you.
It worked out just fine for our family, but are we going to continue a mask mandate for preschool, or are we considering optional also in the early childhood department?
Right now, the recommendation that we're considering would be being mask optional pre-K through 12 district-wide. There is continued a risk at the early childhood level. I don't want to ignore that it exists, and you're right that those youngest children cannot be vaccinated at this time. We already see that the mask usage there, although it happens, it is a little bit different. It's an ongoing working with students to have their masks on and wear them. The other reason that we really have continued with the mask usage, not only to minimize spread, but is that having masks in place is what has allowed us at the other levels to keep students at school. At the pre-K level, under the guidance that exists, none of the modified quarantine options exist for pre-K. So those students, if they're exposed, it always results in going home and being home for the entire duration of the quarantine. And so the mask decision would not change that. Part of the reason why we're also not making the recommendation to remove the masks quite yet for the December weeks is that all of the guidance, whether you look at the national or the state level, talks about not removing all of the mitigation strategies at once, trying to know as you do things what the impact is. And so next month, by changing to the modified restricted quarantine but still having masks, we'll be able to determine, keeping those kids in school, how does that impact us here in this district. You know, several of our other neighboring districts have had different policies in place, and we've been watching their numbers, so we'll see what happens here in December, and that's what would guide then that change for us in January.
So I just want to summarize what I heard and make sure I understand. So if things don't change, we are expecting to see a recommendation next month for masks optional at all of our buildings, and we will never test a student without parent permission, correct?
Yes, and let me clarify. So, because I don't want to, next month, we will make a recommendation to continue the mask guidelines through the end of December. So basically through the end of 2021, that would be another week or so following next month's board meeting, but with an understanding that then when we would return in January, we would be mask optional district-wide for all staff and students. And correct, that question has been raised. Would we be testing students without permission? Absolutely not. Another question was, would we ever we've received several emails, would we vaccinate children at school without parent permission? No. You know, we've held clinics in the past for a variety of different vaccinations. We would never do that without parent consent and parent involvement. And so we don't want anybody to have that concern. We would not test a child or a student without permission.
For the St. Charles County modified quarantines or not? I was kind of confused there.
They are not. Our pre-K students do not qualify for any of the, anything other than, if they're exposed, it'll be a standard quarantine at home. And that has been in place all along.
Any other questions, comments? Turn your mic off now. Okay. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed?
Nay.
Motion carries. Board, I'd like a motion to approve financial statements for October 2021 as presented. Mr. Supple?
Thank you, Mrs. Lang. Just a couple things that I would highlight. Our revenue collections to date are doing pretty well. We're tracking just slightly better than we have last year. I outline a lot of the reasons for that within the memo, but you know, we haven't yet collected any of our property tax revenue. That doesn't happen until December 15th. And so we're still kind of early in our revenue year in terms of seeing what the total impact would be. We have made some projections that our property tax revenue will be a little bit higher than what we had originally budgeted, just because at this point we now have a better idea of our assessed value than we did back in March when we were putting together the preliminary budget. And so we're factoring that into our calculation for revenue. As I mentioned in the memo, the state revenue is a little bit difficult to compare year to year because last year the state had implemented some pretty severe restrictions on state revenue early in the fiscal year and began to ease up on that throughout the fiscal year. So we appear to be running much better on state year over year, but we're actually pretty much on target for what we expect to collect. We did get information from DESE that our transportation revenue will increase by about $500,000. Again, that's going to be a revision that will be included within the revised budget that will be presented later this evening. On the expenditure side, again, things are tracking pretty close. Our biggest expenditures, of course, are for salaries and benefits. We're within a 0.5 percentage point year over year in terms of our percentage of budget expended, so we're moving pretty well there. The one thing two things I would point out. Natural gas, there's been a lot of conversation about potential shortages, and I'm not focusing now on the a recent communication from Spire, but just in general, that there's going to be a heavier demand for natural gas this winter, which could affect the price. And so as a result of that, I did increase the budget for our natural gas through the revised budgeting process, and hope that we'll be in a good position to handle anything that comes our way, but there are some things over which we don't have any control. The other thing I'll mention is that the tax anticipation notes that were approved earlier this year by the board, we had approval to borrow up to $16 million for cash flow purposes. To date, we have already borrowed $10 million, and we still have a couple of payrolls to go. So we may need to access more of, if not the total, $16 million this year. Last year, we only had to borrow $6.6 million. So just indicative of the importance of maintaining an appropriate level of fund balance in order to cash flow our district, because it gets increasingly difficult as that fund balance, if we begin the year with a much lower fund balance, to cash flow the district without significant borrowing in order to do that. So those are the highlights that I would point out to you, and I'd be happy to answer questions if the board had any.
Any questions, comments, board? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Board, I'd like a motion to approve the purchases over $7,500 as presented.
So moved. Second.
Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Board, I'd like a motion to approve the revised budget for fiscal year 2021-22 as presented. So moved. Mr. Supple.
Thank you, Mrs. Lang. Every year we have an opportunity in November to bring to the board a revised budget. In my comments about the financial statements, I highlighted a couple of the reasons why that's important. We have a clearer picture of what's happening with our property tax revenue, which is a significant source for our operating revenue. We also have a better picture of some of the expenditure items that could have a significant impact on our budget. So we've made some revisions to increase revenue, but we've also increased expense a little bit. The good news is that overall we have decreased what we anticipate to be the projected deficit for the year. We still anticipate there will be a deficit at the end of this year based on budgeted amounts, but we've been able to, that gap is narrowed a little bit, primarily because we've increased our revenue projections. I did provide this afternoon an additional presentation that has a slide deck that has some points just to help the public better understand some of the changes in the revised budget. But Dr. Hoven has put together a slide deck that he wanted to share with you this evening that tries to bring the changes in the revised budget and some of the challenges that we're facing as we move forward into a little bit better perspective. So, Dr. Hoven?
Summer, Mr. Supple and I have worked along with Cindy Reilman, our Director of Finance, to look at lots of the documents and things that come into these budget presentations and really try and boil it down to what are the main key points. And my goal is just to put little different words on it to give people that combination to look at the documents that are uploaded into board docs, as well as kind of look at it from a different perspective as well. It's the same information, but just trying to put it into a little bit different perspective. So there's a lot of supporting details loaded into board docs, but I'm just going to highlight a few of the main things. So what you see in here, currently we ended last year, so this is the first time we're able to look back at where we ended in June. Back in June, it was a projected end of the year. Now we're able to point out that we ended last year at a deficit of $2.3 million, which landed us at the end of the year at a 14.8% fund balance. We do have policy that dictates we're supposed to be at a 15% fund balance, and it triggers a 2-year process that we have to get back to above a 15% fund balance. So that's a policy driven process that we need to pursue now to get those fund balances back up. But it is, if you remember going into last year, We were starting the year projecting over a $12 million deficit. We made a lot of adjustments throughout the year. We were able to see some better revenue than we had anticipated, as well as the other adjustments. We ended the year much better off due to many of the things that we did to reduce that deficit last year. So good news, but still a deficit. Moving into this year and looking at what is projected for this current year. So I'll just talk through this slide. The top row is if you look at the projected ending deficit and what Mr. Supple just spoke about, these are the budgeted end of the year deficits. So that talks about what is approved spending, projected revenues, all of that we're projected to be at about an $836,000 deficit. What we do see though in a typical year, approved spending does not all get spent. So anybody's budget, for every $1,000 that somebody is authorized to spend, maybe they spend 990 of it. You add up those small amounts across the entire district, plus if we're able to see any changes in increases in revenue, we typically on a yearly basis, we see about a $5 million swing to the good, meaning all of that underspending, it adds up. And on a budget our size across all of those accounts, plus any changes in revenue, we really are able to predict somewhere around a $5 million swing. So that's good news. That means that if the budgeted deficit is $836,000, you add $5 million to that, it looks that we can talk about a $4 million surplus to end the year, which is great news. And a year ago, we weren't projecting anywhere near that. It was going to be a deficit regardless of how we looked at it. Now, I'm going to talk a little bit more about this in a minute, but we still have the capital funds transfers that we need to talk about, which then takes some of that money back out of those operating funds and puts it into capital. And I'll touch on that in just a minute. But that's a required transfer because those capital funds need to stay positive. We can't run those into the negative, so we do have to replace those funds. And if you take what is currently projected to be $5.5 million into that transfer, that puts us back into ending the year at a deficit of $1.3 million, which would leave us at about a 13.6% fund balance. And I'll touch more on what that means for us going forward. Specifically talking about those operating transfers into capital, because this particular topic has gotten a lot of attention. So the left side of this is what we projected back in June. In June, we projected that we were going to have just under $4 million left in our capital accounts as the year ended. We knew that tax income that goes straight into the capital funds would bring us just about $2 million, meaning that account would be just under $6 million. The second to last line on that left side talks about our expected expenditures. We had looked at all the projects that need to be done, as well as things like bus leases and some other technology, software leases, things like that, is almost $8 million. Meaning we were about $2 million short of what we would need to cover our capital expenses. So back in June, you saw a transfer into capital, a projected transfer of $2 million to cover that difference. Now we get to November, as Mr. Supple said, many of these things are clearer. We have clearer ideas of where things ended. So now we know that our ending fund balance was much smaller than we had anticipated in June. We ended that with under $600,000 left in that capital account. We did see that our anticipated revenue going straight into capital has gone up a little bit, $2.1 million, meaning that account now is really at about $2.7 million as opposed to what we projected back in June. The actual expenditures are very similar. That has not changed much from what we projected in June. However, that means now the difference between those two is about $5.2 million. That's why you saw a bigger transfer shown in the November revised budget. I do want to point out that out of that roughly $8 million in expenditures, only about $2 million of that is set aside for building improvements. As I said, there's a document in board docs that shows really the very specific list of those projects. But again, there's bus leases, there's technology software leases, there's other required spending. So only about $2 million of that comes down to work that we're doing to improve our buildings. As we look ahead to next year, so once we finish this fiscal year and look into the next, at this point, you'll see in the documents that it's projected to end at about a $2.5 million deficit. Same logic we used a couple slides back. We could say, well, we would anticipate $5 million of typical underspending and some revenue adjustments, so that right now we would suggest that looks like about a $2.5 million surplus. However, projected transfers into capital and all of that does send us back into a likely deficit at the end of that year. Now, it has to be said that looking ahead to future years, that does not even include staff raises in those projections. So for us, what those mean, if we're looking at a potential deficit going into the year without giving raises, and we definitely want to be in a position to give raises, that we need to take that into account when we're projecting where we're going to end up in the future. And as a superintendent, I feel like one of my jobs, especially as we fell below a 15% fund balance, is to do what we have to do to make sure that we are not deficit spending, because deficit spending is only going to make that fund balance get lower and lower. We need to get on the right side of that. So what does all this mean for next year? We predict to end this year with an overall deficit. Again, that's after the capital transfers, which is a much better situation than where we ended last year. But again, we do see that it's likely will be in a deficit. Without even factoring in raises, we're predicting a deficit for the next year as well. So factoring in raises, we would only likely cause a larger deficit. So in my role, what that means is we need to look to identify additional cost savings so that we don't go into a bigger deficit while also providing all of our staff a raise. Having frozen staff this year, it's simply something we have got to find a way to do, is to give our staff raises into next year. So we've got some decisions to make to look at where else we can save costs in order to be able to make that happen. And the last piece, if you look at the 5-year projections that are in board docs, and these are numbers that, and part of the reason I do this presentation and not Mr. Supple is that I take a little bit of liberties and round some numbers just to kind of put it in ballpark perspective for people. Do not take these as the numbers you would see in a budget spreadsheet, because that's not what they are. But in general, going forward, when there's a reassessment year, so every other year we expect our revenue to go up somewhere in the neighborhood of $4 million. In the off years, the non-reassessment years, we only expect it to go up about $2 million. So what that means is about every 2 years, we see a $6 million increase to our operating funds. However, rising insurance costs, increasing price of goods and services, giving raises to our staff, all of that ends up closer to about $6 million each year. So now you see a long-term pattern of expenditures growing about twice as fast as our revenue. And so that builds a picture that is not sustainable into the future. We have two choices. We have to figure out how to increase our revenue, or we have to figure out how to decrease expenditures. My concern is when you're talking about decreasing expenditures to the tune of $3 million a year, ongoing and continuing to find ways to cut, it is simply not possible. It's not something we can do. So it leaves us in the boat of really talking about going into the future, how we can increase our revenue. We've made a lot of cuts already, and while much of that was necessary to keep us financially stable, it's not sustainable, and we cannot continue doing that into the future. So there's some good in this presentation tonight, especially compared to where we were at this time last year. However, we are in a spot that going forward, we do need to figure out some adjustments to how we operate in order to be financially stable for years to come. Because I know everyone in this district, we want raises for our people. We know that showing financial value to our staff is a big part in retaining the best staff. We have a fantastic staff, and we want to keep it that way. We value our support staff, our administrators, our teachers, everyone who works for this district, and we want to show them that value, and we've got to figure out how to make that happen. So, any questions?
Anything, board? No? Okay. I appreciate both presentations. Okay, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Board, I'd like a motion to approve policy 6230, regulation 6230, and policy 2420 with the changes as presented.
So moved.
Any discussion, board? All in favor? Aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Next up, we have superintendent comments.
Thank you. Nationally, regionally, and in our own community, there's been a lot of negativity focused on school districts and school district policies and decisions. Unfortunately, this has caused a lot of what I hope is unintended collateral damage. The constant negative attention on school districts is only increasing the stress on our wonderful staff and making it harder for everyone to keep their focus on students. And so the reason I mention all of this, I want to ask a favor of our community. If you have a chance to interact with one of our staff members, support staff, administrators, teachers, any of them, please thank them and offer them your support for the wonderful work they are doing. We are providing a top-notch education for our students and supporting our families in so many ways, and I believe it's important, and our staff need a good reminder that there is support out there, and it would go a long way towards helping us to show them how much we value them. Also, with Thanksgiving next week, I'm looking forward to another chance for everyone to take some time away from work, spend time with family, and hopefully find a chance to relax. We, as administration, are going to continue to work to explore other creative ways to alleviate stress across the district. We recently put out a thought exchange that will be out a little bit longer for our staff, and once that's completed, we're going to spend some more time looking at ways to continue to problem solve to alleviate stress for all of our staff across the district. But in the meantime, please enjoy the time away with your loved ones.
Board, do you guys have any comments? No?
I just want to thank our veterans again and all of our schools for all the effort they put into the programs that they did. It's always a great day in Francis Howell. All of our schools put a lot of effort into it, and I want to thank all our administrators, all our teachers, everybody that participated in our across the district and for doing that, and thanks again to all our veterans.
Anyone else? Okay, and we have a curriculum first reading on our board docs, along with information in our upcoming meetings. So, saying that, board, since we did not finish our closed session, I would like a motion to return back to closed. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries.